Shanghai, May 28, 2023. A China Eastern Airlines COMAC C919 takes off on its first commercial flight. The cabin is packed with Chinese officials and carefully selected passengers. The cameras are rolling. The message is clear. China has built a competitor to the Boeing 737 and the Airbus A320. For 40 years, Boeing and Airbus have controlled the global aircraft market, a complete duopoly. They set the prices, they control the supply, they dominate everything, and now China says, not anymore. Here's what makes this absolutely fascinating. The C919 isn't just an aircraft, it's a weapon in a geopolitical chess game. Every sale is tied to infrastructure deals worth billions. Every order comes with strings attached. But here's the part nobody's talking about. The C919 is built almost entirely with Western components. The engines are American and French. The avionics are American. Even the landing gear is foreign. So how can China break the Western aviation duopoly by using Western technology? And why are Boeing and Airbus terrified despite the C919's reliance on their suppliers? Have you heard of the COMAC C919 before today? Drop yes or no in the comments, because what I'm about to show you will change how you see the future of aviation. Subscribe to Skyline Secrets right now, because we're exposing the geopolitical strategies and the power plays that mainstream aviation channels completely ignore. Hit that subscribe button. This gets strategic. Let me show you exactly how dominant Boeing and Airbus have been. In 1980, the commercial aircraft industry had multiple competitors: Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, Lockheed, Airbus, and several smaller manufacturers. By 2000, it was down to 2. Boeing absorbed McDonnell Douglas in 1997. Lockheed exited the commercial business. The smaller players couldn't compete. From 2000 to 2023, Boeing and Airbus controlled over 99% of the global market for aircraft with more than 100 seats. That's not market dominance. That's a complete monopoly split between two companies. Boeing has delivered over 11,000 aircraft since 2000. Airbus has delivered over 12,000. Together, they've generated over $2 trillion in revenue. But the real power isn't in the sales. It's in the control. Airlines depend entirely on Boeing and Airbus. If you want a modern, efficient fleet, you have only 2 choices, and both companies exploit this ruthlessly. When the demand is high, they raise the prices. The backlog of orders is measured in years. Right now, if you order a new 737 or A320, you won't receive it until 2029 or 2030. The airlines are trapped. They need new aircraft but have no negotiating power. Boeing and Airbus set the terms. Take it or leave it. This is the system China looked at and said, we're going to break this. The question is, how do you break into an industry with trillion-dollar barriers to entry and 2 entrenched incumbents that control everything? China's answer: don't play by the traditional rules. Now let's talk about the COMAC C919 itself, because the aircraft reveals China's entire strategy. The C919 is a single-aisle aircraft designed to compete directly against the Boeing 737 and the Airbus A320. It seats 168 to 192 passengers. The range is about 4,075 to 5,555 kilometers. But here's what's remarkable. The C919 is assembled in China, but almost every major component is made outside of China. The engines are CFM International LEAP 1C engines. That's a joint venture between GE Aviation in the United States and Safran in France. American and French technology. The avionics and the flight control systems are made by Honeywell and GE, American companies. The electrical power system is made by Hamilton Sundstrand, American. The landing gear is made by Liebherr Aerospace, German Swiss. The APU is made by Honeywell. The nacelles are made by Nextel, an American-French joint venture. Even the wheels and the brakes are Honeywell. The fuel system is Parker Aerospace, American. The only major systems designed and built in China are the fuselage, the wings, and some of the interior components. Everything else is imported. This seems like a massive vulnerability. How can you break the Western duopoly by depending on Western suppliers for every critical component? But here's where China is playing a different game. They're not trying to build a purely domestic aircraft right now. They're learning, they're acquiring the knowledge, they're building the credibility. The strategy is brilliant in its patience. Phase 1, build an aircraft with Western components to prove you can compete. Phase 2, gradually replace the Western components with Chinese alternatives over 10 to 15 years. Phase 3, export of fully Chinese aircraft. We're in Phase 1, and it's already working better than anyone expected. Do you think China can replace all the Western components eventually? Share your prediction in the comments. Now let me show you the real genius of China's strategy, the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative is China's massive infrastructure investment program across Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and South America. China invests hundreds of billions building the ports, the railways, the highways, and the power plants in developing countries. And increasingly, aircraft purchases are being bundled into these deals. Here's how it works. Let's say you're a government in Southeast Asia. China approaches with an offer. We'll invest $5 billion in building a new port, a high-speed rail line, and upgrading your telecommunications. In exchange, your national airline will order 20 COMAC C919 aircraft. The aircraft purchase is just one small part of a much larger package. The country gets the critical infrastructure. China gets the influence and a new aircraft market. This is the strategy that Boeing and Airbus cannot counter. They sell aircraft. That's it. They can't offer to build your country's entire infrastructure. China can, and it's using this leverage ruthlessly. Real examples. In January 2024, Indonesia's Transnusa Airlines signed a letter of intent for 20 C919 aircraft. At the same time, China committed to investing in Indonesia's new capital city infrastructure. Coincidence? No. In 2023, Brunei's national carrier signed an agreement to evaluate the C919. At the same time, China and Brunei announced the expanded Belt and Road cooperation. This pattern repeats across multiple countries. Aircraft deals are bundled with infrastructure investments and trade agreements. Think about it from a developing country's perspective. You desperately need infrastructure investment. The West isn't offering it. China offers billions with only a few strings attached. One string is buying some Chinese aircraft. Would you refuse the deal because you prefer Boeing? Of course not. You take the infrastructure and buy the C919. This is how China is breaking into the market despite having an inferior product that depends on Western technology. They've changed the game from who makes the best aircraft to who offers the best total package. What's your take? Is this fair competition or economic coercion? Let me know in the comments. But let me show you the massive vulnerability in China's strategy. The C919 depends almost entirely on Western suppliers for the critical components. The engines, the avionics, the flight controls, all American or European, and those suppliers are subject to Western government export controls. If the relations between China and the West deteriorate, those supplies could be cut off instantly. Imagine COMAC in 2027. You have orders for 1,000 aircraft, you're ramping up the production. Then the United States announces that GE can no longer export the LEAP engines to China. Your entire production line stops. Your credibility collapses. This is not theoretical. It's very real given the current geopolitical climate. China understands this vulnerability. That's why they're investing heavily in developing the domestic alternatives. They're developing Chinese jet engines through the AECC. They're developing Chinese avionics and flight control systems, but this process will take 10 to 15 years at minimum. Jet engines are incredibly complex. You can't copy a Western design and expect it to work reliably. In the meantime, China is completely exposed. Every C919 depends on Western technology. Boeing and Airbus are lobbying their governments to maintain the export controls as a way to constrain COMAC's growth. This creates a race against time for China. Can they develop the domestic alternatives before Western governments cut off the supplies? Right now, the answer is unclear, but the risks are enormous. Will Western governments cut off the component supplies to China? Drop your prediction below. So where does this leave us in 2026? Can the C919 actually break the Boeing Airbus duopoly? In the short term, no. The C919 won't make a significant dent over the next 5 years. The aircraft is unproven, the production rates are too low, the dependence on Western suppliers is too great. But in the long term, 10 to 15 years from now, China has a real chance to become a significant third player. Here's why. China has 3 massive advantages. First, the domestic market. China is the world's second second largest aviation market and growing the fastest. If COMAC captures 30 to 40% of the domestic sales, that's thousands of aircraft. That gives them the scale and the credibility. Second, the Belt and Road Initiative. China's infrastructure investments create captive markets across Asia, Africa, and South America. These are the fastest growing aviation markets. Third, patience and long-term strategy. Western companies think in quarterly earnings. China thinks in decades. They're willing to lose money for 15 years to establish a strategic position. Boeing and Airbus are playing market competition. China is playing strategic positioning. They're not trying to build a better aircraft today. They're trying to shift the balance of power over the next 20 years. By 2035, I predict the global market share will look like this: Boeing 45%, Airbus 45%, COMAC 8 to 10%. That doesn't sound like much, but it breaks the duopoly psychology. The airlines will have a third option. Boeing and Airbus will no longer dictate the terms. They'll have to compete on price and service. The comfortable duopoly will be disrupted. The C919 won't replace the 737 or the A320, but it doesn't have to. It just needs enough market share to break the duopoly's grip. So here we are in 2026. China has launched the C919 into commercial service. The aircraft depends on Western technology. It's not as proven as the 737 or the A320, but none of that matters in the geopolitical chess game China is playing. Every C919 sale strengthens China's position. Every Belt and Road deal creates new opportunities. Boeing and Airbus still dominate, but for the first time in 40 years, their duopoly is being challenged, not by a better product, but by a better strategy. China isn't trying to win on technical excellence. They're winning by rewriting the rules entirely. Final question: 20 years from now, will the C919 be remembered as China's successful challenge to Western aviation, or as an expensive failure? Drop your honest prediction in the comments. If this investigation opened your eyes to the geopolitical strategies reshaping aviation, subscribe to Skyline Secrets immediately. We're exposing the hidden power plays and the long-term strategies mainstream media completely misses. Hit that subscribe button, smash the notification bell. Next week, why is Airbus betting everything on hydrogen-powered aircraft when the technology doesn't exist? The gamble that could revolutionize aviation or bankrupt the company. See you in the next investigation.